Tua, I don't know. I don't know what the market for Tua would really be if the Dolphins did not extend him. When you're looking to extend these players, it's almost like you've got to be at around $50 million a year, or the extension's not going to happen.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a new week, which means it is a Monster Monday, always presented by DraftKings. Always thankful for those of you that use the code Ross, whether it's the DraftKings app or DK Sportsbook, DK Horse, whatever. You're going to go over there and do those things. Use the code Ross. We'll have a new fresh college draft episode this morning where we're going over the AFC North with Emery Hunt. Only 2 weeks left as we go through every single draft choice for every team and some of Emery's favorite undrafted free agents, which is one of my favorite parts. I don't even know a lot of the undrafted guys that these teams picked. Of course, we'll have Steve Fezzik with the Even Money podcast tomorrow, Joe Dolan, and Tom Brawley on Wednesday's Fantasy Feast, going over what you need to know from the OTAs and mini camps from a fantasy football perspective, the tidbits and nuggets put out there by the beat writers. Check me out on social media. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. Posted some beer, posted some meat over the weekend. You got to follow on every platform. At Ross Tucker Pod is our handle, and I'm really excited about today's guest. It's interesting because I've been in the industry a long time, and so has he, and I've read a lot of his stuff, and we've interacted back and forth on social media a number of times over the years. I couldn't remember if I've ever had him on the show or not. He does an absolutely fantastic job. Very excited to talk to Jason Fitzgerald from overthecap.com. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
Yeah, hey man, how you doing?
Awesome. Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. Truly appreciate it. I guess I do have to start with just your background, man. I think a lot of people know about overthecap.com. People probably follow you on social media. But how did you start it? And is this your full-time gig? Give us the breakdown.
No, my background is in stuff that has nothing to do with football or salary cap or anything like that. Just a big fan of the sport, and I've always been drawn to numbers, been drawn to math. I'm actually an engineer, so I do plastics engineering. Pretty boring kind of stuff. But this is kind of a side thing that I've always enjoyed doing, and I've been glad to have an opportunity to contribute to kind of the NFL landscape, getting in on the analytics side of contracts and discussion of different things related to roster building.
Yeah, so I would highly recommend you follow Jason, at least on Twitter or X, at Jason_OTC. Does a terrific job with all of the contract stuff. And it feels like, especially since over the weekend, it's a perfect time to talk with Jason about all of these contract issues going on around the NFL. I guess I want to start. I'll give you a blank slate, Jason. Your thoughts on Trevor Lawrence's contract. Was it about where you thought it would come down? Your thought on how the Jaguars quarterback did?
I thought that's where the numbers would come in. I thought they'd be right around that 55 million number, which is what he comes in at. I think the Jaguars actually did pretty well for themselves. I think he would have been better off waiting this out. I think that there was a lot more upside for him if he went out there and had a really good season this year. If the Jaguars went and actually competed for the playoffs, won a couple playoff games, I think he could push that number to about $60 million a year and probably gotten a structure that's a little bit more favorable for him. I mean, it's still a really good contract, but I thought that he kind of rushed into it. I didn't think there was any reason to do it now. I mean, at the very least, you could wait for Jordan Love, wait for Tua, see if any of those teams do something, see if the Cowboys do something with Dak Prescott. But instead, he jumped right into it, wanted to match Burrow's annual value, got there. But Burrow's contract compared to his is a lot stronger.
Why is that?
If you look at the way that Burrow's payments work out, Burrow earns significantly more money on the front end of his deal than Trevor Lawrence will earn on his. Joe Burrow, new money, I think he makes about $75 million, $80 million, just in the first 2 years of that deal, over his same time as his rookie contract. Lawrence's is going to be about 45 million. Lawrence's numbers track more with Jared Goff, Justin Herbert in the first 2 to 3 years of this contract than they do with Joe Burrow. Eventually he catches up, but that's the point of the contract where it's unguaranteed and you never know what's going to happen. So it's always better to get that money, up front in the contract, and he didn't really get that here.
What about, you mentioned these guys, Tua Tagovailoa, Jordan Love. What do you think ends up happening there, both in terms of timing and numbers?
So I think Jordan Love's deal will get done. I think that'll get done this summer. I don't think the Packers will kind of wait that out. I would imagine that he's going to come in under this, but I think he'll be over 50 million a year. I think he'd be in that 52, $53 million a year range. He rushed into this last little extension that really made no sense. So I think this time he should look, and maybe will look, to do a little bit better. The Packers don't guarantee a lot of money, so he'll probably get a really large signing bonus, and that'll be the full guarantee that you see on that contract. But I think that one will get done. Tua, I don't know. I don't know what the market for Tua would really be if the Dolphins did not extend him. But when you're looking to extend these players, it's almost like you've got to be at around $50 million a year or the extension's not going to happen. I think for both Miami and him, I think I'd probably wait things out, see how this year goes, and then let the chips fall where they may. I don't think I would rush into it for either side.
Interesting. I guess from my perspective, he's got the concussion issues. He had the hip issue at Alabama. I mean, if they offered you $50 million a year and over $100 million, fully guaranteed, I think more than all these other guys, Jason. And it's funny because you always come at it from the cap perspective and contract. I obviously have the former player's perspective.
Yep.
And I would think that the Dolphins are scared to death because one more concussion and he might say, like, that's it, right? Like, I'm not doing it anymore, theoretically. Meanwhile, for him, he has seen his football mortality now multiple times. And I think, deep down in places he doesn't like to talk about, he realizes, he could be one hit away. And I'm quite sure he would want to get that contract now before that potential career-ending hit happens. I know you can say about every guy, but he's already seen it a couple times up close.
So yeah, the concussion aspect of it's pretty interesting because that's very different than a lot of the other injuries that we've seen. That you're mentioning. The threat of injuries to quarterbacks and it really impacting them financially is much more limited than it is to the other positions. Like Dak Prescott got paid a year after he played 3 football games before he got hurt. You've seen it with multiple players at that position. The exception would probably be someone like Teddy Bridgewater, who just got a devastating injury when both knees got blown out pretty much at the same time. That's incredibly rare to have happen to that extent. But the concussions are something different, and that is true that is something that if that happens, that can pretty much be a career ender. And obviously, I think that would be on his mind somewhat as well. But I don't know. It's still part of me says that I think there's more to be earned if he can go out there and, again, have the team go deeper into the playoffs than what we saw last year.
It's funny, too, Jason. I talked to the guy one time, and he said to me, the difference between $60 million a year or whatever the number was at the time, right? But let's just say in today's numbers, the difference between $55 million a year and $50 million a year doesn't make any difference in your life. The difference between $50 million a year and nothing, that's a big difference. That's a big difference in your life.
That is absolutely true.
It feels like, Jason, I talked about this Friday. I was filling in for Dan Patrick, and it feels like there's like no middle ground. It's either the team decides you are the franchise quarterback and you get paid one of these $50 million plus contracts as a result, or they kind of move on from you. It just doesn't seem like there's a lot of middle ground there. The only guy I can even think of off the top of my head who's between like $10 and $40 million a year, I think, is Baker Mayfield, who signed that 3-year, $100 million deal with the Bucks. I think actually looks really good for the Bucks now, considering how he played last year compared to some of these other guys. Are there other guys in the middle ground? Is there anybody else in that area that I'm missing? And why can't they ever? Why does it seem like it has to be one or the other?
Yeah, there really hasn't been a middle ground, and that's been one of the problems with the quarterback market. If you go and you look at it, you're either getting paid a lot of money or you just fall all the way back, in the pack, and you're kind of competing for a backup job. The other players that would probably be in that area right now, Geno Smith with Seattle. They did a really good job there. A lot of people thought, myself included, that he would probably get close to $40 million a year. I think Seattle put their foot down, said, we're not going to franchise tag you. You can go and test free agency if you want. And I think they knew right away that free agent market wasn't going to be that robust the way it might be for, Kirk Cousins this past year. The other one would be Derek Carr. I think he's in at about 37 right now. That's a little bit lower. That's not as low as the Baker Mayfield, right around 30, and Smith right a little bit under 30. But you're absolutely right. The decision is basically you're either going to get paid like you're one of the top 5 players in the league, or you're just going to get bumped down and you're going to have to compete for a job and play with a lot of incentives in your contract.
It's absolutely crazy. Almost as crazy as how many Labatt Blue Lights I had over the weekend, including a bunch yesterday on Father's Day. Drink some Labatt Blue Lights with your friends. Live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. Okay, what about Stafford and Dak? They're kind of in a different category where they're both going for like their 3rd or 4th or 5th contracts, whatever. But clearly they both feel like they deserve an upgrade and, it's funny because it seems like Stafford really wants it, Jay, whereas Dak is like, hey, fine, I'll go be a free agent. Knock yourself out.
Yeah, so, I think they're kind of at different places with the organizations that they're at. Stafford signed a deal not that long ago with the Rams right off the Super Bowl, and I was actually surprised that he didn't get more than he did. He actually seemed like he settled for a contract right at $40 million a year, and the market just blew right past that. Jared Goff getting over $50 million a year, and Stafford, who, kind of replaced him and won the Super Bowl, sitting there at 40. That's kind of surprising. So I kind of think that's why he's looking for some kind of more security and to, kind of bring those numbers up. I think in Prescott's case, they've played this pretty much from day one to have a lot of leverage at the end of their contract. And that's where they're at right now. And they pretty much hold all the leverage over the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, they really have no other option if Dak is to leave the team. He's going to leave them with about $40 million in dead money if they let him become a free agent. And they can't really go in there and, tag him next year. So he's going to be a free agent no matter what. So I think that's pretty much what he's playing into.
Wow. Let's talk about that. So basically the Cowboys, almost no matter what they offer him, Dak can just keep saying no. They're going to have to blow these other deals out of the water to get him to agree to it, aren't they?
Yeah, I've pretty much always held that Prescott has the best chance of being the first $60 million a year quarterback. And it's just because of the timing. It's just the leverage he has. It has nothing to do with him being the best player in the game. He's not. And you can argue if, one of the arguments that I made about it to someone before, if you couldn't win with Dak Prescott at $40 million a year, how are you going to win with him at $60 million a year? But again, unless Dallas just wants to start over, what other option do you really have?
Wow. What are they doing, Jay? I mean, all the other teams are proactive with these guys, and the Cowboys, they don't have Micah Parsons signed, CeeDee Lamb, Dak. I mean, and maybe they're waiting to resolve the Dak thing to do CD or to do Micah, but like that's their three most important players.
Yeah, they're different than a lot of teams in that regard. Now Dallas still has a very old front office. Jerry's owned the team for a long time, and he pulls a lot of the strings, I think, there. It makes them a little bit different with their approach than some of the other teams. And the thing is, with the way that the career arcs are going right now for so many players, it's kind of better to get these deals done early rather than late. And they've probably cost themselves a lot of money through the years by waiting like this. And you get into these situations where it doesn't really become good either, because you're going to go into training camp and everything is a distraction. It's like, why is your wide receiver unhappy? Why is your pass rusher unhappy? Why is your quarterback unhappy? Instead of just focusing on this is our best, or maybe it's our last chance. I don't know, best chance, but last chance with this kind of group, to really compete. And we're just busy arguing over, who should get $30 million versus $32 million a year. And, it almost just seems like a waste of time. I look at Dallas and say, they did this with Prescott the last time. Didn't want to do a deal, went through the franchise tag. He played all 3 games. They gave him a record-breaking contract, for that time. You're going to end up in that place anyway. Just find a way to get a deal done. And they've been unable to do that.
What about another organization I'm a little bit confused by right now is the team that you are the fan of, and that is the New York Jets. As soon as the Eagles signed Huff, I knew they were going to move on from either Reddick or Sweat, and then they got Sweat to take a pay cut, and everybody in Philly was all upset when they traded Reddick, and they're like, oh, he's only making $15 million. I'm like, he's not playing for that amount of money. Like, if he was willing to play for that amount of money, he'd still be with the Eagles. Like, they know he's not playing, and he shouldn't be. He's making like less than half of what Nick Bosa and these other guys are making. What were the Jets thinking? They had to know that they had to give him a new deal, and maybe they just will, but it seems to me like they would have been better off just doing it right away.
Yeah, I think that they went into that, and I think they really thought that this was going to be like, hey, look, you're coming here, you're playing with Aaron Rodgers this year. We're going to get a lot of attention in prime time again this season. You're going to get a good opportunity next year somewhere else, and he's going to be happy with it. He's had all those opportunities with Philadelphia. I mean, okay, is Jalen Hurts Aaron Rodgers? No, but I mean, they've been an incredibly successful organization, so it's not like he's going from a really bad football team to a team that's expected to compete. He's going from a situation that was competing before to another one where, it might compete. And, there's reasons for the Jets to maybe not play him as much as he played before due to the trade terms that are there. Jets also like to do a lot of rotations on defense. And, when you're looking to be a free agent, you want to pad your numbers as much as possible. You don't want to look like you're trending down. So I would think that would make him even more just say, I want to get an extension. And I just think the Jets misread it. I think they thought that he was just going to be happy with a change of scenery, and that's not really what was the issue with him at all.
No, especially because he's from Philly. He loved playing in Philly. He just wanted a lot more money, and rightfully so. I would say he's awesome. I mean, he's a very, very good player. So I don't really blame him. I just, man, that one is interesting to me. The last one, Jason, T. Higgins reportedly signed his tender. That kind of surprised me. I kind of thought he would wait. I thought maybe he would wait till a couple weeks into training camp. He didn't. There was nothing, to my knowledge, compelling him to sign it now. What do you think happened there?
I have no idea. Usually in those kind of spots, you would just hold out all the training camp. They can't fine you. You're just trying to push them on it, and you're going to hold out for as much time as you can, and to sign it, that's kind of surprising. I doubt there's anything on the horizon. It didn't sound like there's anything on the horizon for them doing anything with him long term or having a trade partner or anything like that. So, I guess just whatever in his mind, maybe he's just resigned to the fact that I'm going to be playing with him, so I may as well just do whatever I can to make sure I'm, still a big part of this offense and I can put up big numbers and they let me walk next year.
I I think that must be it. There's no other explanation other than he just is like, okay, I'm doing a 1 year deal. Then I'm gonna be a free agent, and I just want to be all in, and I want to lock it in now. I don't know. It's that was a weird one to me. Jason, absolutely love having you on the show. Appreciate the time. Everybody needs to check out overthecap.com and follow him on social media at Jason_OTC. Does a fantastic job. Really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross. Well, like you guys just mentioned, Bengals receiver T. Higgins, he signs his $21.6 million franchise tender.
So this is interesting because on the one hand, Jack, if I knew I could sign a piece of paper and guarantee myself $21.6 million, that the first day they gave it to me, I feel like I would have sprinted from my apartment in there, punched the cap guy in the face, and signed it before they could change their mind. On the flip side, though, if you're a guy like him that's this caliber of player, I'm surprised he didn't at least skip the first couple weeks of training camp where there's more injury risk, and also it's a terrible time. It's the worst time of the year. I mean, I would have been like, yeah, why don't you go ahead and skip the 3 weeks where they're in two-a-days and show up for once they break camp. That probably would have been what I would do, but I think he just wants to make sure he put it behind him and make sure he's totally locked in and doesn't miss anything during camp.
And we finally got a conclusion to the tampering with the Atlanta Falcons Philadelphia Eagles. The Atlanta Falcons, they lose a 5th-round pick, $250,000 fine, and GM Terry Fontenot, he gets a $50,000 fine. The Eagles were not found to have tampered with Saquon.
Isn't it interesting you just said Saquon? You didn't even say his last name.
I mean, it's one of those names that's so unique in sports. It's like LeBron. Like, there's no other, there's not like a LeBron Smith or a Saquon Jones.
But how many other NFL players are just go by their first name?
I would say Tua and Dak are probably the two that really come to mind.
Tua for sure. Dak for sure. Saquon.
Zeke, technically. Like, I don't know if you would count, like Zeke Elliott. I don't know if you would count that because it's not technically his first name.
Yeah,
it's Ezekiel.
Zeke is, I think, a good one. That's just interesting. They're like Madonna. He's like Madonna. So, yeah, there was a lot of conversation about the Eagles and tampering with Saquon for nothing. At least they weren't found to have done it. As for the Falcons, I don't know. I think, look, there's a lot of tampering that goes on. Okay? There's a lot of stuff at the combine that goes on. I think the message that the NFL is trying to send with punishing the Falcons is like, you just can't be blatant about it. You just can't be you can't be publicly making statements about how you're already talking to the trainer before you're allowed to. Like, they're not going to be able to catch people unless people come out and basically make it very clear themselves like the Falcons did. And I saw where people were saying, well, it was worth it. They got Kirk Cousins. As if Kirk Cousins, A, wasn't talking to other teams, and B, as if he wasn't going to go to the Falcons anyway. Like, what do people think that the Falcons really gained by this? His agent knew what other people were offering and what the money was. He wanted to go to the Falcons. It's not really the difference between a guy going to a team or not.
Well, stick in Philadelphia, and their play-by-play voice, Merrill Reese, he's going to get the Pete Rozelle Award from the NFL Hall of Fame in August.
So cool. For those of you that watch on YouTube, youtube.com/RossTuckerNFL, Merrill is the guy right above the LF in Jack's hat. He has like a signed Merrill Reese 8x10, which is just absolutely legendary. Love it, Jack. 47 years he's been doing it, I think. Longer than I've been alive. It's just remarkable.
Longer than I've been alive, too. And we've got some roster news. The Bengals, they give center Ted Karras a 1-year extension. Saints running back Alvin Kamara, he's going to skip the final day of minicamp because of a contract dispute. Dolphins, they signed defensive lineman Calais Campbell, and the Chargers, they signed safety Tony Jefferson.
Jefferson was retired for a couple years. Didn't like that. I don't think it works out that well usually for guys that come back from being retired for a year or two typically. We'll see. Calais Campbell, put him in the Mercedes Lewis category of just ridiculous that he's still playing that position at that age. And the Kamara thing is one to watch moving forward. Other than that, I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. You guys know how I feel about it. Any birthday, any anniversary, backofficescheduler.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.